What is up, guys? You're tuning into this Okiru podcast. I'm your co-host, Jasper, and we thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope you enjoy this episode. Make sure to follow us on our socials at Okiru on Instagram, Okiru on Facebook, Okiru on YouTube, and also Okiru on major platforms such as Spotify and Apple Music. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. We hope you enjoy.
Okay.
So anyway, Emmanuel, it's absolutely a pleasure to meet you, man. How you been?
Yeah, good. Yeah, it's been hectic, but I'm good. We're here, so I'm excited.
We're excited to have you because you have a teacher background, and when you were replying to our stories about like you're sharing that mindset with your students, we were like, we've got to have you on the podcast and talk about this. Like, what's it like being a teacher, and what's that mindset that you're bestowing on your students?
Yeah, no, look, I guess for me, as I never, like, being a teacher wasn't part of who I wanted to be when I finished high school. It kind of just fell into it, and that's all thanks to my girlfriend at the time, is my wife now, and she was the one that kind of like that told me, hey, why don't you give education a go and teaching a go? And I've always been fascinated with sharing experiences, sharing knowledge, and yeah, just chatting to young kids. Hey, like I love just being young at heart, and I love all that interaction with the kids. And I guess for me, I learned very quickly to just model my teaching based on my awesome teachers that taught me when I was in high school, right? And I think there was a podcast that you guys had a while back. I think you had one of your mates in high school who's also doing his own thing, like his own little business and stuff. I forgot his name, apologies. And you guys were saying like, a lot of the teachers that kind of like you remember were the ones that like took time to get to know you, right? Like took time to get to know you as the person, in a sense. And it's the same for me. It's the same experience that I had. And, when my lecturer told me, like, you think of how you model yourself as a teacher and kind of like figure out the ways that you would, interact with kids and all that sorts of stuff. And I just kept thinking back to my business teacher, my English teacher, like these teachers who just kind of, they really took the time out to get to know me as a person. I was a shy kid, right? Like I was a shy kid, like during high school. Yeah. And even sometimes I feel weird standing in front of like all my students, because like, man, I never saw myself in that I guess in that perspective, in a sense. But yeah, like it was a lot about like I needed to get to know my kids. I needed to get to know my students, because at the end of the day, these kids are going to be in my classroom for 30 hours a week. They're going to see me more than probably seeing their own parents or their own families. And I know like any type of influence, whether good or bad, is an influence, right? So it doesn't take much to say, g'day, how's it going? And it doesn't take much to just have that bit of banter with like some kids. And I found early in my career that, when I did get to know my students, I tend not to have so many like disciplinary issues in my classroom, because, we've built that rapport, we've built that respect. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to get like that one or two kids who's just going to like test me, right? Like, but I also have to, I always think back to like, okay, I can't get angry. I can't react in a negative way, because if I react with that energy, I'm going to get that same energy back.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just like, okay, I got to step back. I got to process this a little bit, and then go in and go, hey, what's actually going on, right? And I find like a lot of my students really respect that. Even though they don't say it in words, it's just their actions. And yeah, so I've never had a disciplinary strategy as your lecturers would ask you at universities, like you need to have a disciplinary strategy. You need to have like 3 strikes you're out kind of thing, or like send a kid out and whatnot. I never thought to have it, because like for me, it was more to do with like, this kid's acting up, and there's a reason why he's acting up or she's acting up. So I got to get to know that person. I got to get to know the person inside that student. And it's always been my philosophy. But yeah, it's just something I grew up, because we migrated to Australia in like late 80s.
Yeah.
So I was born in the Philippines, came here when I was 6 years of age. And as the years progressed, we had more and more Filipino families coming into the neighborhood. So I turned into that kuya figure, right? Like the big brother figure. So I grew up with a whole heap of like just kids around me.
Yeah.
So a lot of my family friends, like we're still so close now. And we've known each other for over 30 years. And I found that background really helped me in my career in finding, I mean, I'm not a finished product, but at least it allowed me to have the guidelines to be able to approach teaching in a certain way, I guess my way in a sense. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
I was just blabbing. Hey, I totally apologize.
That's incredible. I think there's a lot to unpack there, because you talked about the mindset with how you became the sort of teacher you are, and we went from you becoming an immigrant and you being the queer of like that neighborhood, and using that as your teaching as well. I guess there's like so much to unpack it. I guess like, guys, help me out here. Like, I know Lim has a very he loves to hear the experiences of immigrants, because he has a history of immigrants and coming from different places as well. So I guess there's like, I honestly don't know what to start.
I'm interested in as well, and a thread I'm very curious about, Emmanuel, is you said you were a shy kid, right? And Jasper, Gerald, myself, we all thought of ourselves growing up as shy kids as well.
Wow.
It's interesting how the journey we've taken to become a shy kid in our shell, and then discovering and going on a journey, and then here you are standing in front of a class, leading the way, and showing students
absolutely
what to do, how to live life. So I'm curious how your journey progressed from that shy kid to opening up and spreading your wings, and how old are the young people that you're teaching at the moment? Because you're calling them kids. Kids can be
I know. Like, they're my pseudo kids. Like, I've got two kids of my own. Like, I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. But I tell my own kids that they've got pseudo brothers and sisters, right? So, it takes me back to year 11, I guess. Like, I was that kid that was just cruisy and like staying under the radar, kind of just, getting C's and B's and not necessarily going above and beyond in a sense, and kind of just really hiding. Hey, like I didn't want to put myself on like, I guess a stage light in a sense. But it was, I think we had a year 11 retreat, and in that year 11 retreat, it was just like, was probably, my coming out stage in a sense, because like we had a PE teacher, and his name's Mr. Firth, and he was just awesome. He was always asking the kids like how they were going and all that sort of stuff, and really, really getting to know like the kids, right? And I honestly thought, because I was such an introverted kid back then, that he didn't know I existed, if that makes any sense. Until that retreat, right? Until that retreat, when I was part of his group. And I remember as soon as he just looked at me, he's like, Emmanuel, what are your opinions? Like, whoa, he knows my name. Like, okay, this is ridiculous. I never had him personally as a PE teacher. He was one of the teachers that taught our cohort. So I knew of him, and I knew how awesome he was, because he was just like this guy who was always there at recess and lunchtime, playing handball with all the kids, like playing like soccer and basketball and all that sort of stuff. He was always there. And for him to say, hey, Emmanuel, what are your thoughts? I'm like, whoa, hang on. Like, this guy is actually asking for my opinion. And in my head, I'm like, I better say something intelligent, because I don't want to make this the like, I guess, I've got one shot, right? So just say something. And we just started talking about like the whole topic of the conversation during that time was like spirituality, right? Like it was all about, I went to a Catholic high school, and we're talking about spirituality and how important spirituality was to us as an individual. And when he asked for my opinion, and I gave it to him, I kind of shocked him with, I guess, man, this kid actually speaks, right? Like, and at the same time, it's like, wow, this teacher actually listens. So it was kind of that combination that made me realize, like, oh, hang on, actually, like, the things that I'm thinking about actually does matter. And even though I may be wrong, there could be just like that one instance that someone's thinking the same way. And that was like the best camp I ever had as a high school student, right? Best camp. It was like 3 days, 2 nights. And it was just, those 3 days for me was just like, man, like, I can actually speak my mind in a sense, but being respectful, right? Also being respectful, but speak my mind, and, and respect the people that disagree, and respect the people that agree, like, with my ideas. And that was like the starting point. That was the starting point of me kind of like, wow, like, let's go. I've only got 2 years now, but let's go. Right. Yeah.
How powerful is that, right? You've recounted a story of a year 11 retreat or camp of a teacher asking you, what is your opinion?
Yeah.
And that's the power of the impacts we all have on connecting with others, and I guess in your role as a teacher, it's just so powerful now.
Yeah.
But generations of young people coming through, and you're leaving your own mark on them. And I guess it's an opportunity for you to change the world in your own little way, I think. Hearing that, it's like, it's pretty far out, right? Like, it's kind of, it is. I don't necessarily know the kind of impact I have on my students until they graduate. And then I bump into them, I guess, 5 years later, when we, bump into each other at some shop or something. And I'm just like, hey, let's have coffee, because I want to know what's going on with you. Yeah. Like, I want to know what's happening and all that sort of stuff. Like, the best moment I've had so far in terms of my teaching career for 2022 was a few months ago. I was invited to go to like a sneaker event, right? Like a huge sneakers. Right? That could be another podcast, but so I went to this being invited, not knowing many people, but just knowing like a handful of people that I interacted with online. But as I was talking and chatting and all that sort of stuff, like, the corner of my eye, I saw someone come into the room, and then all I hear is, Mr. G. I'm like, oh man, this is hectic. This is so hectic. So I went up, and it was, lo and behold, one of my students from, oh man, like many years ago, 2014, maybe I reckon 2013, 2014, or even earlier than that. And most of the night I just sat with him, and I was like, tell me what's happening. Tell me what's up. Like, like, how's uni? What are you doing now? Like, have you traveled? Like, tell me everything. And we were just like catching up, right? Like, the funny thing was, he actually wasn't a student in my classes. So I teach elective subjects. So I teach technology subjects. So all the kids that are enrolled in my subjects are the ones that choose it for year 9s and 10s and 11 and 12, right? So I get the kids who want to do my subject, but that doesn't mean I don't still have that handful of kids that are very, very difficult. But he wasn't one of my kids. Like, he wasn't one of my students. Like, I just got to know him because, I spent that time at recess and lunchtime just hanging out with him and his friends, and just like, the banter, and just like, playing basketball with them and all that sorts of stuff. And it's funny because we spoke about that. We spoke about like, so like, he didn't even teach me, but I love just like, just hanging out, because you were like, he said like, you were one of the few that would be out there, like just hanging out and stuff. And that was like an awesome moment of like, I think we spoke for like 2 hours. Hey, like, we were just chatting about stuff. And then that wasn't even talking about shoes, right? Like, so obviously he was there because of the sneaker event, but we were just talking about like, in the last 10 or so years, like, what's been going on, like,
how's the family? How's your sister? Like, I still remember sister and all that sort of stuff. I still remember, we start talking about some of the memories and whatnot. But, just hearing him saying, like, I'm starting my own little business just to earn a little bit of money. I've been traveling around the world. I've, I have a partner, and it's like, cool, that's awesome. And he's starting to get into the same things I'm getting to, which is, like the whole sneaker scene and stuff. So, like, that's the type of, like, I have no idea the type of impact I've had, but speaking to him, it's always reminding me of my why. Like, this is what I do it. Like, this is the reason why I do what I do. It's not instant gratification, but it's that time of, like, when those 17, 18-year-olds become adults and they have that definitive moment, maybe, when you're always thinking about all that stuff in the shower, right? And to have that moment, it's just like, well, hang on, like, what am I going to be now? Like, what am I going to do? All that sorts of stuff. And to know that I was part of that journey, man, that's huge. That's huge for me. Yeah. That gives me so much buzz, like knowing all that sorts of stuff. So like, definitely the role that I have is very influential, but I don't necessarily see it until later down the track. Yeah.
See, that's the beautiful thing about, like, impact in the way we're all kind of doing it. You're teaching students, and we're just kind of like sharing people's experiences, sharing people's stories. And the beautiful thing is, sometimes we will never hear the impact we have on people, and sometimes we'll have a beautiful moment where one or two people will come up and be like, hey, like, thank you for the stuff that you're doing, right? And it's just like a beautiful, like, wow, the stuff we have done all this time has paid off in some sort of way.
Absolutely.
And it's like we say, it's not instant gratification type of deal. It's a long game. It's like it's a hidden reward. Sometimes, like, the thing is, like, when we stop, we know we're not going to have impact anymore. But as we keep going, we can impact and create ripples in the sea of the world. But it's just about that. We just got to keep showing that love. It's that unconditional pursuit for what we're doing. It's not that, I want to get all the rewards from the stuff that we're doing. And it's a hard thing to understand. But, like, for you sharing your story, I hope people can, like, realize that, just being kind and just being a good person, like the way you are, like, this guy wasn't even a student, but you impacted his life because you were just kind enough to show him, kindness as a teacher, right? And that's the beauty of it. I guess, like, what's something you always want to share to your students that can potentially leave that lasting impact, if there's anything in your classes?
I think it's not about, like, I know there's content that we've got to teach. Like, there's a curriculum that we use, and it's kind of like our Bible when we're teaching our subjects. But it's more to do with, like, really allowing the students to, not how should I say it? Not teaching them what to know, but, like, how to know, if that makes any sense, right? Because I think like, if you teach them what to know, they kind of just remember that until the exam is done, right? But giving them that that confidence, or that sensation of knowing that when you walk into Mr. Guevara's room, it's going to be a safe environment for you to take risks, right? For you to, like, what, if you're wrong, you're wrong. If you're right, awesome. If you're wrong, hey, let's figure out why you're wrong, and let's just switch it around, and so that you can understand that that's all learning is, right? So I guess in that sense, it's more to do with, like, I guess, like, kids really need to understand what true education is, like, what true learning is all about. And, in the classroom, they're in a classroom for 13 years of their life, which is a small speck considering they've got this huge lifespan like ahead of them, right? So in that 13 years, like, what is it? You know, they're doing so much more than just learning the stuff in the classroom. You know, especially now, like, you know, as soon as they hit year 7, puberty hits, right? So they've got to navigate through that. Then they've got to navigate through relationships and friendships, right? Then they've got to navigate through like HSC or VCE, you know, like all the major exams and all that sorts of stuff. But at the same time, like, when they're at school, like, school's very low on their priority list. Everything is about relationships, and everything is about interactions with, like, you know, their friends and what's going on outside. And I think for my students, the one thing that I want them to understand is that, you know, like, yes, I want you guys to learn in my classroom, but at the same time, like, learning about life and being part of that journey of you realizing something that you know, that light bulb moment, man, those are my favorite moments, man. Like, that happens and I'm telling everyone about it. All right. So it's really about, like, just giving them giving my students the idea that, you know, it's okay that if you make a mistake, so be it, because that's learning. You know, that's one way that, you know, you're never going to do again. So let's do it a better way, kind of thing. And that's the same kind of philosophy I have when I'm, you know, with my own kids. You know, my son, he's 6 and he's in year 1. And whenever he doesn't get something the first time, he gets so upset. Hey, like, he's just like, I don't get it. And he's just so upset and he's so down on himself. I was looking at him, I was like, dude, like, remember that time when you said you couldn't play Super Mario Brothers and now you're kind of like a pro at playing it? It's like, oh yeah, cool. You know, I'm always using that analogy with him because, like, he loved that, right? Like, so I was like, you know, just think of it like, you know, your Mario Odyssey. Like, you know, you hated it the first day that you played, but you kept trying, right? And it's like, oh, okay. So kind of like really relating to the kids is one of the biggest things for me. And that's the reason why I was saying I'm just a big kid at heart. Like, I think that's definitely one thing that I'd love my students to take away from my class, is just to know that this point in their life is a small part of their journey, of knowing who they can potentially be, but not to be scared of that potential person that they can become. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. I love the way you do your teaching methods, how you try to connect with your students, and, you know, making them being heard and recognized in their classroom. I just really like it too. Like, it's amazing. And, like, how do you approach, like, with kids that are, you know, they first come into the classroom and they're not too familiar with the space, or even kids that are, let's say, like, not really into school, like, not being there? How do you deal with those type of kids?
Good question. For me, it's not getting into their face straight away. Like, I give them kind of like, I let them, like, especially with new students in my classroom, I give them that time to kind of like let the classroom marinate, in a sense, get them to figure out who they're sitting next to, figure out who their friends are during recess and lunch, or who they're trying to, like, get to know. And then kind of like, you know, I kind of let that sit for about a week. And then the second week, that's when I come in and is like, hey, like, yeah, you enjoying the subject? You're loving school? What's happening here? I've noticed you've been talking to so-and-so. Do you guys like have stuff in common? Then I kind of just like ask all of these questions until it hits a lot of things that, you know, I'm into as well and know a little bit about. So then I can, like, just come as like, oh yeah, you know, like, you know, your football team and the music that I listen to and all that sorts of stuff. But it's, for me, it's not going in guns blazing, right? It's not about, like, I hated going into a classroom when I was in high school when the teacher is just like, you know what, this is my classroom, this is how it's going to be, you're doing things wrong, it's my way, that's it, right? And this is how we're going to be doing the next year or the next 2 years in this class, is we're going to do all of our activities like this, you're going to stick your pieces of paper like that, your margin's going to be 2 centimeters from the left, and all that sorts of stuff, right? And like, as soon as, like, I remember as a kid, like, hearing that and knowing already in the tone in the voice of that teacher, and how much it's already like, oh man, this is going to be a dictatorship for sure, right? You're kind of like, then what's the use of my opinions then, right? Then you start to shut down. It's like, what's the point? Let's just do the work, and just whatever it is that they want from me, I'll give it to them. But if they're going to come at me with that energy, to be respectful, obviously you're not going to be hitting them back with that energy, but you know, there is a thought of that, right? So there's a possibility that could happen. So I guess for me, it's, I got to match that energy, not battle the energy. I got to match it, right? So yeah, it takes a while for some students, because a lot of students are very, like, kind of stick to themselves. They're very much like introverted in a sense, but they won't share a lot of things with you at the start until they know that it's safe.
Yeah.
Like, and when that happens, man, like, honestly, recess and lunchtime, there's my door is figuratively open. Even though it's closed, I'm going to have students just knocking on the door, just wanting to catch up and what's going on and how they're going and stuff. But yeah, it's very important for me to just ensure that all my students, as I was saying earlier, that they feel safe in my classroom, so that they can take those educational risks, right? So they can take those risks where, you know, it can potentially lead to a light bulb moment. I never got those opportunities when I was in high school. Hence why I was always just like, you know what, I don't want to share, because I felt like whatever I was going to say wasn't going to be correct, or wasn't going to be taken seriously in a sense, because my views were completely different to the views of the person that was leading the class.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, I just agree to disagree in a sense. But yeah.
Love that, man. It's so beautiful. I just love your mindset on how you approach things. It's amazing, man.
So Menor, you're clearly one of the coolest teachers in the school.
No, I don't try to take on that title, and you know, I'm appreciative if some of my students think of it in that sense. Man, I'm just a dad, hey, like I'm the biggest dad, but yeah.
But given that, how is your relationship with the other teachers at the school? Because you get so much love from your students. I'm thinking that it might inspire other teachers to become better, to become more relatable, and build those type of connections with their students as well. Yeah. Or do you see the other side? Do other teachers become jealous that you're the popular one with the students rather than them? How's the relationship?
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. So for me, I love the energy of young teachers. Like I get drawn to that, right? So whenever we have, like, you know, a lot of the teachers that I kind of really appreciate at, like, in terms of their time at school, are the teachers who are willing to have that, who are willing and also have that growth mindset already, right? Like, those are the teachers that I know that I can, like, sit down and then just share. And we're just sharing different strategies and how to work with different kids, right? Change is a big thing. And I've learned that very quickly, is that change is a big thing for a lot of people. For me, not so much, because I've always learned how to adapt really, really quickly. So for me, change is kind of just like, cool, this is an opportunity for me to learn something new, right? To grow, in a sense, to be a better teacher, to be a better person, so on and so forth. So, you know, you always get those vibes from different teachers where it's kind of just like, oh yeah, you're just the teacher that all the kids love, but they don't necessarily see all of the things that I actually do behind the scenes. Like I remember there was this one time, like in a staff meeting, when we're talking about like, you know, how to relate to students, the resistance was coming from a lot of the seasoned teachers, and I get that because change is a huge thing, right? Education system has evolved, and it's kind of like, you know, you just have to learn how to adapt in a sense. But it was like, I remember a couple of teachers just like, one of the comments was, like, I don't know how to play basketball, and I don't want to go to the basketball court. So how else can I relate to kids? I'm like, in my head, I was like, it's not about you playing the sport. Like, it's not that. And it was just, like, for me, I tend to stick with a lot of the staff members who share the same mindset, because I feel like sometimes when I'm in a situation where I start to get that vibe that, oh, it's getting a little bit negative, hey, like it's getting a bit toxic in a sense, I kind of walk away, because I don't want those thoughts to influence the way that I see a particular student that they're talking about, right? Like I don't know if teachers are talking about like, you know, everyone loves Mr. G. I doubt that very much. But yeah, for me, it's definitely just sticking with the people that I know will help me grow, right? Help me grow and not keep me back. And that's kind of just like, you know, if you're not willing to hop on this train that we know is going places, then by all means, like, see you later. Like not that I won't support those teachers. I still will, right? I still will. But I know that my influence will stop to a certain degree, right? Because there's something that's blocking that. There's something that's, you know, it's their own personal thoughts, it's their own personal philosophies that's blocking or not agreeing with how I see things. So there's always that clash. There's always that conflict. It is. It's a bit hard. But I, you know, I do hope that I don't necessarily just want to be seen as like, oh, that's the cool teacher. You know what I mean? Like I want to make sure that, you know, there's substance to it in a sense. But I'm just very fortunate that the subject that I chose to major in is, oh, sorry, hey, good night. Sorry, that's my daughter. Sorry.
It's all right. All good.
Just fortunate that. I was very fortunate that the subject that I wanted to teach were the elective subjects. So, you know, at least I have those kids that choose my subject. So they have that
innate curiosity. Hey.
Yeah. So you can play on that like straight away, right? Sure. And I mean, there are some kids who choose the subject just because that's the only subject left on that line. They don't want to do chemistry, or they don't want to do business studies and stuff. So I'm the last one, right? But because those kids are choosing my subjects doesn't mean that I don't have kids that I am going to struggle with behaviorally, or I'm going to struggle with because they have their own learning disabilities and all that sorts of stuff, right? I think for the most part, a lot of like other teachers might just see that, you know, my subject would be easy to teach because the kids are choosing it, right? They want to be in my subject. Whereas, you know, with all the compulsory subjects, it's kind of just like, well, I've got to teach the kids that I've got to teach that's in my class, right? And that always makes me angry. Well, I wouldn't say angry, but it always just like gets me fired up, because like, man, if you have the ability to be the teacher of the entire cohort, that's awesome. Like, that's such an opportunity for, hey, what are we doing? Like, let's build some relationships. Let's build some, you know, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, I'm very different the way that I think and the way that I do my stuff in the classroom. But yeah, it's very, very, I look, I'm long in the tooth, right? Like I'm not a young teacher anymore. Like I turned 40 last year. So, I'm in that generation that's in between the new school and the old school.
Yeah.
So we kind of like, there's a group of us who feel like we need to bridge that gap. Like we need to let the new school teachers know that, hey, we're going to need the experience of the old school teachers, right? And we got to let the old school teachers know that, hey, we're going to need all this energy and all the vibe that the new school teachers are sharing. Like we need all that. So yeah, there's like a group of us that's kind of just like in the middle in a sense, like generation wise, right? Generation wise. And like, I'm not saying that they're old, but I'm just saying like generation wise, like we just went through, we have the same kind of like similar upbringing, similar philosophy, all that stuff. So I feel like that core group is an important part of the school community.
So I've heard there's a guy I follow. His name is Balaji Srinivasan. He's a futurist and technologist. During COVID, look, everything went online, including schooling, right? So he had a thought, and I thought it was really interesting, where you've got the best teachers in the world that could offer certain subjects. For instance, say it was like year 11 calculus, for instance. Given it's online, that teacher could teach thousands or millions of students at the same time because it's all online, right? And or you might have like maybe tutors at schools, or this new model is like, all right, you watch a video or a lecture of the best teacher in the world at that subject teaching, and then in the classroom you might have like tutors or teachers supporting listening to that best teacher. Like I'm curious what you think of that. And this follow-up question is, how were you able to build connection through online learning during COVID as well?
Sorry, yeah, like that's an awesome, I've never thought of it in that sense. Okay, good night. That's awesome. Like I never she knows there's cameras here, so she's just like yeah, sorry. No, that's awesome way of looking. I've never thought of that perspective. Like that's amazing. Like imagine you had one of the best teachers, say in English, and then as part of the classes you also have other teachers, right, including students, and you're just learning in the same space with like-minded people. I think that's amazing. Like if that was a thing, oh man, like sign me up. Like 100% sign me up. Like I know for a fact for me, and I know I'm just speaking on my behalf and a few of the teachers that I'm working with, is that we know that we're not finished products. We know we're a work in progress. And we are so open to a lot of that stuff, like a lot of just like, hey, this is a new way of thinking. Let's do it. Okay, cool. Let's try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Let's try the next thing. Yeah, but that's awesome. Like sign me up if that happens. Like honestly. But sorry, what was the follow-up question? I forgot that. Apologies.
That's all right. It's how were you able to build connection with your students in an online manner during COVID? Your hands up in your head. You're like, oh no.
Yeah, no. So for me, last year would probably be that entire term of remote teaching and remote learning would be the hardest time or the hardest part of my career in my 15 years of teaching. And the reason being is like in my classroom, man, I love noise. Hey, like the kids are working, but there's noise. Like it's organized chaos, right? Like it's I love that stuff because the kids are collaborating. There's some kids who are learning on their own. There's some kids who just thrive in collaboration. Let's do it. And when I'm teaching, I don't necessarily, I have textbooks, but I use them as a guide. I don't necessarily teach from the book. So I use them as a guide, and a lot of like, I'll have a plan of like, okay, this is the topic that we're going to learn for this lesson, and at the end of the lesson, these are the things that I want you guys to take away from it. But in the middle, how we're going to do all that sorts of stuff, that's where it becomes kind of like not ad lib in a sense, but it's kind of just like, you know what, I'm going to let you guys dictate the vibe of this class today. Because for some of you, you might be like, you know, something's happening outside of school that's affecting you in the way that you're learning. So it might be a lot easier for you to just partner up with one of your mates and do the work together. Some of you are just like, you're just like thriving right on life at the moment. You just want to go and just like finish it off and do all the extension stuff. So do it, right? But at the end of it, we're all going to come together and say, all right, did we hit these 3 objectives? Because if we did, then cool, we've done an awesome class. But when I was online learning and online teaching, you can't keep up that conversation with the kids. It's like, man, it was most of the time the kids don't even turn on their cameras, right? And I hate that because I can't tell. Like body language for me is important. So I can't tell if they're receptive to what I'm teaching. So I had to adapt real quick, and it turned into just like, all right, guys, like these are the things that I've put together, because like worksheets, these are the worksheets that we're working on. You've got 50 minutes to work on this. So 10 minutes before the 50-minute lesson is done, I'm going to call another meeting and let's see where you guys are at, kind of thing, right? So it was very difficult for me to just sit in front of that camera for like 50 minutes because it wasn't conducive to the way that I taught. And I found it so difficult because I didn't have that because the energy of students dictates my energy in the classroom. So when the kids are just all hyped up and stuff, oh man, that class is crazy. Like it's going to be heaps of fun. We're going to just be having good banter and we're just going to talk about stuff. But when it gets, you know, a little bit on the other side of the spectrum, it's just like, all right, cool. Like, what do we do? How do we fix this in a sense? Well, not how to fix it, but how to improve it in a sense. And you couldn't gauge that online. Like it was just, I just hated logging in. Hi kids, the same 4 or 5 kids that were logging at the same time. You know, some of these kids weren't even like, they were still sleeping, right? Or some kids were like on their PlayStation while like class was happening. You just didn't see because the camera was off, but you can definitely hear there was some like buttons being pressed, right? So you could never tell, and it just really, really frustrated me because I couldn't determine whether what I was doing was sticking or was they were absorbing it in a sense. So yeah, it was tough, man. Like I remember after term 3 and we all came back in term 4, I was like, man, I can't wait to go to school. I just want to see the kids. Like I just need to be at the front gate and high five the kids as they come in and just get all excited. But yeah, it was definitely tough. It was kind of like I never understood how much it affected me until like reflecting back on it afterwards. Like, man, like that really, really made me feel like I wasn't doing my job. Do you know what I mean? Like I just didn't feel like I was doing my job.
Damn.
And that was the biggest thing for me. Yeah.
Wow. So how did you know, that affected you, I guess, since mentally, like how did you bounce back from that? How did you allow yourself not to stay in that mindset for too long?
Yeah. I guess a bit of background, right? My wife is also a high school teacher.
Oh, wow.
My son started kindergarten last year. So when he was doing his remote learning, my wife and I were in the middle of our remote teaching. So we had to kind of juggle in a sense to make sure that my son was able to complete all his stuff while we were able to do all our things to teach our kids as well. So it was a lot of juggling, and it was crazy because we also had like a 3-year-old at the time, my daughter, right, who needed all the attention in the world and all that sort of stuff. So we were really like, we kind of just like, okay, that's the reason why we both had to adapt a certain way of teaching. Like it wasn't very conducive for us to be in front of that camera for the entire day. We had to conduct our classes in a way where, hey, you guys go away for the next 40 minutes and work on all this stuff. I'll still be online. Hit me up with questions if you need it, and I'll type all these sorts of things. If you need me to speak to you in person, we'll do a one-on-one thing, so on and so forth. But I was very honest with my students. I was just telling them, like, both my wife and I were very honest with our students. We said, you know, we've got a son who's in kindy doing his stuff as well, right? We're not saying that you guys should not do your stuff and just, you know, be kind to us in a sense. We're still here. You just need to hit us up because we can't read your minds, and we'll take it on further, kind of thing, right? So it was a lot, like we were just adapting a lot. It was a lot of just, I need to walk away, I need to go for my walks, and I need to listen to my sneaker podcasts and all that sort of stuff, get my head out of it. And at the same time, you know, my wife and I reminding ourselves that, you know, we can't, as frustrated as we were in the situation that we were at, is we can't show that frustration because the kids, our own kids, are going to feel it. They're going to sense it. And we want them to know that, you know, our own kids, that, hey, mum and dad are actually doing some work, but you're still an important part of us. Like you're still priority. Like we have all of these students behind the cameras, but you guys are still priority. Yeah, and I think a lot of my students like really appreciated me telling them like, okay, I just gotta go help my daughter. She's in the toilet, and like, so we're just being honest and not hiding. But yeah, it was tough, and it was a lot of like hitting up my friends like online and just playing some video games. Hey, even for an hour, like get on Discord, guys. Like I just let's play Minecraft for an hour, and I don't care what we do. If we're just digging, like let's just dig. Let's dig for an hour and catch up and see what everyone's doing and stuff. And it was a lot of just using, you know, chatting platforms to connect with like friends overseas, teacher friends, doing a whole heap of just, you know, Zoom meetings and stuff, just to catch up with people. But it was definitely crazy. And we tried, I know for me, I tried not to let it affect, I guess, my mental health in a sense, because I knew that like my 2 kids would be uneasy as well. So it's kind of just like thinking about them for most of the time. But you know, like one of the ways that helped me was there's a group of kids that I would always chat to, see how they're going, touch base with them in person, right? So during remote learning, I was using our platform, our school platform, to send them direct messages to see how they're doing, to send them messages in our classroom spaces, you know, what's been happening, and let them know what's going on, or emailing them, and just letting them know, like, if you guys want to just, you know, if you've got a free period next period, so do I, so you guys can just hang out in this space with whoever's on, and we'll just chat. So we got to like, so towards the end, it was just like, it was very refreshing just to still have those connections with my students and still be able to like, oh, cool, we still have this, you know, we still have this platform that we can use to see how you guys are doing and whatnot. So yeah, it was a little bit crazy. I definitely don't want to do it again. Like every time I hear the word lockdown, I'm like, you know what? I shouldn't complain because you guys are down in Melbourne. Because I know you've heard locked so many times. So so every time I hear that, I'm just like, oh man, I just don't want that to. I don't want not to be in my classroom. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't want to take too much. I mean, we don't want to take too much of your time because we understand you got to take care of your kids, and it's a working day tomorrow as well. So I guess we'll close this out soon. But I guess just from this short conversation we had with you, like I think just I have a higher level of respect for teachers now, just hearing your experiences and what you have to, I guess, shoulder, as well as your personal lives and taking care of a classroom of kids. Like I just have an immense respect for you and all the teachers now. Like you don't realize it as a student, but like just chatting with you and hearing your experiences, it's just like, wow, I wish I was a better student. Sometimes I look back, I was like, oh, I wish I kind of made things easier for my teachers as well, right? But like what you're doing is absolutely incredible. And, like if I had a teacher like you, I would be so excited for school, just your mindset, your attitude towards your students is incredible. And, I hope many more teachers follow suit. And I guess I want to ask this question, like you have a magic wand, you have the power to change the education system, or you could change it however you want. What would you do? What would you change with that power?
Wow. I guess the first thing would be just the recognition, as you were saying, the recognition of teachers, right, and recognition of just educators, because I don't necessarily think that the way society perceives us to be is like we're not glorified babysitters. Like we, like, oh man, teachers get all the holidays. You know what? Like the last 2 weeks we've had non-term break, so we've had school term break. But in the last 2 weeks, I'm still marking assessments. I'm still grading exams. I'm still preparing for term 3. So I know that as soon as I get in my classroom, we're all set. There's always the back of my mind, always thinking about like, okay, so what can I do next? How do I improve? Things like that, right? But I guess the recognition is definitely the first thing. And the second thing would be like, just get rid of standardized testing, like honestly. Because the biggest thing, right, like the biggest thing for us is that, the educational governing bodies that we have in different states are always changing the way that teachers should be teaching, right? So there's this big move to like, hey, let's be more engaging. Let's do more project stuff. Let's get all these kids to be working together and learning together in that. And instead of being a teacher, like a traditional teacher, be that facilitator, be that person that facilitates all the learning within a certain group, right? Yeah. And then come year 12, when they do HSC or VCE, hey, you guys sit down and write on a piece of paper for 3 hours. I'm like, well, hang on. You're not necessarily testing all the students, right? Because everyone's got different learning abilities. And that always frustrates me. Like, we're teaching, for example, like in one of my subjects in year 12, it's a 120-hour course, right? So within the 4 terms that students are in my class in that year 12 cohort, they're doing 120 hours of whatever content that we're doing, right? Their final exam is 3 hours. So there's 120 hours of content that I'm trying to like shove into your brains. Yeah. But the 3 hours that they choose to put on that piece of paper, I have no idea of what that is. So it's like the kids who are awesome at writing paragraphs, you're going to do well. The kids who are really good at drawing and like creating diagrams and like putting pieces together, you can't test that on a piece of paper. Yeah. Do you get me? Like, it's just so frustrating. Like all the creatives, oh man, like if they have to sit down and here's a piece of paper, 3 hours, go start writing an essay. Dude, like even I struggled writing an essay. Like I can't do that. Like, so I guess that would be the second thing. Yeah. Those are the 2 things probably, if I had that magic wand. Right.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Jens, did you have any other, things you want to ask?
Yeah, one last question. I just wanted to ask, with you being a dad and, did you, once you became a dad and then you're teaching as well, did you bring any of that, did that change your teaching philosophy or style, or even vice versa with your kids, like, you're a teacher?
Oh, no, that's an awesome question. It's kind of, I think it worked the other way around. I think I'm very, very grateful that I was able to develop my ability as a teacher, because a lot of those things that I have learned in dealing with students and dealing with teenagers and dealing with like conflict and all that sort of stuff allowed me to kind of apply that in the way that I bring up my own kids. Right. So it's quite funny that, it's like, for my wife and I being teachers, I think for us, we know, we have an understanding of how students develop, and we have an understanding of how every single student is a different student, right? We know that, my son would be awesome in one thing and might not be good in another thing, and that's okay. Like, that's okay for us, right? But with my parents, because they're so old school, it's kind of like, where's the A's? Where's the A's? And do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, he's 6, like he's in year 1. Like, we know he's still developing, like, himself as a student. And I think understanding that as I was going through uni and being a young teacher, that's really helping to help guide my own kids, like, into understanding that, what, if you're wrong, it's okay to be wrong. Like, like, I never had that opportunity when I was growing up, because, like, old school Filipino families, man, like, it's look, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just because they obviously grew up with a different their upbringing was different as well, so they're reflecting what they were taught, right? So and I didn't really understand it until later on, like, as I got older. So sometimes now it's kind of like, I know with my own parents, it's kind of just letting them understand, like, it's okay that this is happening. It's fine, because I know in their world back then, it probably wasn't, right? Like, no way would there be, like, me as a, and I don't mean to be all stereotypical here, but being a teacher from a culture where from our culture is not a stereotypical job, right? Like, and I know, like, as I was going through school, I know, like, my parents, or my dad especially, was just like, so are you, like, what do you want to do? Like, I know he wanted me to follow in the footsteps of, not really following the footsteps, but thinking of, like, a career in, like, accounting, or like something in business, right? Like, where you wear a tie, you wear a suit, you carry your bag, you go into that train, you're in your cubicle for whatever it is, and you come back home. That was a job to them, and that's cool. I get that, right? But for me, it was like, man, I'm interested in becoming a chef, so I want to do an apprenticeship and be a chef, and then teaching and all that sorts of stuff. But it's allowed me to really help my little two, to just, again, be open about, like, that open-mindedness of, like, hey, this is actually part of learning, and this is actually part of education. This is part of life, in a sense. And I think being a teacher first really helped, because I was able to deal with so many different dynamics,
I love that. That's awesome.
One last one from me is, we spoke a lot about impact and leaving impacts, right? Yeah. But what has the impact been on you and your personal life?
Wow. Okay. I know those moments where I'm able to sit down with students that I have taught in the past, and speak to them about how life is going, and listening to all of their different successes, it's funny because I always remind them, hey, remember that time I always say how, like, you know, success comes in many forms, and they kind of start nodding their head and stuff. It honestly solidifies why I wouldn't say I chose, why I am where I am at the moment. Like, on my journey, like in my journey, I should say, I'm where I need to be. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm where I need to be, and all of the challenges that come my way in that specific spot of my journey, I need to learn from that. I need to learn and take in all the good things, take in all the bad things. And it's not a reflection on me as a person. It's just, this is happening because this is where you're at, and you're going through this because you're doing some great things, and there are challenges now that are kind of just like making you second guess of what you're actually doing. So don't derail from, I guess, that track, and just stay on it. And it'll, you know, you'll, I guess, tend to push those barriers or you know, knock down those barriers as you keep going. But yeah, like, my students have a huge impact on me, like kids in general, man. Like, I just honestly, like, recess and lunch are my two favorite subjects still. Right? Still. Just because there's, like, you know, recess is 15 minutes, and then we have lunch, which is 45 minutes. So to me, that's another hour that I can spend with another student, right? It's another hour that I can just, like, touch base with a kid, another hour to, like, to just get to know another kid, like, get to know what's happening, what's going on. But yeah, that's the way I see it, in a sense. But yeah, impact wise, man, though, I wouldn't be who I am right now without those kids, like, without my students. You're not supposed to have a favorite cohort, because that's like an unsaid thing. But there are definitely two cohorts. There are definitely two cohorts in the past 15 years that I'm still in contact with a couple of students, and seeing how they are, and you know, being invited to their wedding and finding out, you know, they're having a kid, you know, hanging out with them as adults and stuff. You know, that's pretty awesome. So there's two cohorts that are just like, that basically has a huge piece of, like, my heart, in a sense, because, like, I kind of, it's because I kind of grew as they were, I guess I grew with them, if that made any sense. Yeah. Because I was a young teacher back then, right? Like, a very young teacher, but I grew as they were growing. Yeah, wow, that's pretty deep. Hey, sorry, boys.
Love it, man. That's incredible.
But yeah, like, you know, we have this program at our school where, just a bit of background again, where the kids have an ability to travel overseas, spend 10 days in a country that needs help, right? So, which is awesome. And, you know, whenever I go to, I'm part of that, I get to know the kids more because they're outside of the classroom. I get to know them as a person and how they treat other people. So the two times I was able to do that were the two cohorts that I just resonate with all the time. Like, they've just become if my students start to listen to this pod, just cover your ears now, but they were my favorite cohort. Just because there was a lot of growth. Like, there was a lot of growth from both the kids and myself. So yeah.
Wow, that's incredible, man. Look, to me, just having this conversation with you, like, I see you as a learner, leading learners. You're a leader to your students, right? To all your students. And I wish, you know, I feel like we can talk about a lot more is in this conversation, but you know, we can go until midnight for sure. But we don't want to take too much of your time. So let's close this off, and you know, we'd love to have you back on.
Oh man, I'd
talk more about this, man.
Yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Yeah,
that'll be awesome, and we'd love to hear more stories about the students you're impacting, and you know, we'd love to hear more about you impacting the education system, man, because what you're doing is wow, I'm speechless. Like, this is what I imagine a teacher would be, and I don't want to throw shade at all the other teachers I've ever had, but you're leading an incredible example. And that's why I see you as a leader, because you lead by example. But as we end all podcasts, we like to ask 3 questions. We'll answer them as we go. So first question, what are you grateful for?
Oh man, I am grateful for my family, my young family, like my wife and my 2 kids. They keep me going, like 100% grateful for that. Yeah.
Awesome. Second question, what have you realized?
Wow. Yeah, that I definitely need to understand that I'm learning as well. Right? Like I need to really remind myself that that following is a different way of leading. Yeah.
Wow, that's deep. And final question, what's a question you want to ask yourself or a question you want to ask your students?
Like, does Mr. Guevara really have sick kicks, or you guys are just saying it? Oh no, that's an awesome question. I guess it would be like, how impactful me being a part of their journey is, right? At this point in time, not waiting like 10 years, but just I'd love to know, what is it that I'm helping them to learn about and know about, right? So, yeah, I guess, yeah.
Wow. Well, look, man, I wish I could shake your hand because I'm like, you are an incredible teacher, and I'm inspired.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, as I was saying, I'm just modeling all the awesome teachers that allowed me to grow into who I am now, right? So, I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this, to be part of the pod. It's been awesome.
Look, man, thank you for spending the time with us on a Sunday evening, and we really appreciate you. Like, seriously, what you're doing is incredible. I lack a better word, man. I don't know what else to say. It's just what you're doing is
something in. I just want to say, Emmanuel, look, you are a hero, right? People
man,
think
that's pretty crazy.
Teachers as heroes, but you've got your firefighters, your ambulance drivers, your paramedics, and all that. But look, you are impacting our future generation, and it's because of you that kids will be able to look back and think, "Oh, Mr. G, what a man!" And then themselves will take inspiration that, hey, life can be this joyous and beautiful, and you can laugh and make jokes and banter, and it doesn't have to be so negative and insular as well. So look, keep what you're doing, and hopefully this podcast goes out to other teachers or maybe your students who would want to be teachers as well. Or maybe they didn't realize they wanted to be teachers and they did. Who knows? It's the invisible marks that we leave.
No, you know what? Like,
powerful.
That's one of the best compliments is like when past students come back as trainee teachers.
Wow.
At the same school, like it's the best. Like it's so cool. Like I know it's obviously not just me, but I just remind them it's because of me. But no, no, but it's awesome, and just to hear that from you guys, it's very humbling because I don't necessarily. I guess see myself in that light because I'm kind of just doing me, right? Like I'm kind of doing what I feel like that needs to be done. But yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like totally humbled, guys. Like 100%.
All right, guys. Well, let's close this out. Thank you once again for coming on, Emmanuel. We hope you guys found value in this podcast. Always stay safe. Always take care. Always get up. Peace.
Okay.